We're going to start with these overnight developments on the coronavirus pandemic.
The total number of cases in the U.S. has surged above 600,000 deaths from the virus. That's nearly 30,000. And according to new numbers, more than 1/3 of those fatalities are here in New York City. The health department revising its death toll to now include nearly 4,000 probable victims who were never tested.
In the meantime, the president is backing away from his claim of absolute authority on how and when the country will reopen. He now says he will leave those decisions to each state's governor. The president also ordered a freeze on U.S. funding for the World Health Organization, blaming that UN-led agency of mishandling the outbreak and a cover-up. That's where we're going to start our coverage. NBC's White House correspondent Kristen Welker on duty. Kristen, good morning.
Hi, Savannah. Good morning to you. With pressure mounting to get back to business, President Trump is now saying that some states could reopen before that May 1st deadline that he initially set. And he says it's up to the governors, not him, to execute that. But there is still widespread concern that if things move too quickly, it could all backfire. This morning, the push to reopen parts of the nation's economy intensifying after President Trump said Tuesday it is up to the governors of each state to make that happen.
I will then be authorizing each individual governor of each individual state to implement a reopening and a very powerful reopening plan of their state at a time and in a manner as most appropriate.
The president acknowledging some states will be able to lift social distancing restrictions sooner than others.
We have a lot of those states. They're set to open practically now. We're going to let them open sooner than the date. We're going to pick a date. We're going to get a date that's good, but it's going to be very, very soon, sooner than the end of the month. We have beautiful pieces, beautiful states with capable governors. They know when it's time to open.
A shift in tone coming just a day after the president declared he had total authority to make the decision. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo downplaying the bitter back and forth between governors and the White House.
This is no time for politics, and it is no time to fight. I put my hand out in total partnership and cooperation with the president. If he wants a fight, he's not going to get it from me. Period.
Meantime, this morning, new controversy over news the president's name will appear on those coronavirus relief checks passed by Congress. It comes after these comments earlier this month.
I'm going to sign them? No. It's a Trump administration initiative, but do I want to sign them? No.
The Treasury Department denying reports that the process of adding the president's printed name will delay the paper checks, saying economic impact payment checks are scheduled to go out on time and exactly as planned. There is absolutely no delay whatsoever. Democrats pouncing overnight, saying the president is politicizing the process.
I wish it were the only ego trip. It seems almost every day the president thinks this crisis revolves about him and his desires, his needs, his enemies.
All of it as the president is making a major announcement, saying the U.S. will be halting funds to the World Health Organization. Mr. Trump accusing the WHO of failing to sound the alarm on the virus quickly enough, and for saying China was being transparent about the initial outbreak there, which the organization denies.
The outbreak could have been contained at its source with very little death.
The U.S. is the largest contributor to the WHO, and there could be a battle brewing over those funds. Some top Democrats say the president doesn't have the authority to unilaterally cut the funds. They also note that he initially praised China's response to the virus, and they say, bottom line, cutting those funds could hurt the global response. Savannah.
All right, Kristen Welker leading us off. Kristen, thank you.
Now to more on that mounting question over how and when to reopen the country. Overnight, California's governor laid out the framework to lift the order in his state. NBC national correspondent Miguel Almaguer has that part of the story. Hey, Miguel, good morning.
Hoda, good morning. With California announcing a state record of 71 deaths in a single day, the state still faces a monumental challenge and a task ahead. But after early calls for social distancing and orders to stay at home, the governor says there's reason for hope.
Because you have practiced physical distancing, the stay-at-home orders, you have bent the curve. Vowing not to allow politics to influence public health, Governor Gavin Newsom stressed Californians still face at least several more weeks at home.
That's the sober reality, but it's also a reality that I think provides a little bit of light.
California, Oregon, and Washington state now creating a regional alliance.
This virus doesn't recognize state boundaries. We have to work together on a plan for reopening.
7 northeastern states have announced a similar partnership. Roughly a third of the total U.S. population, 105 million people, live in these 10 states. But as the West Coast sees a sliver of light, New York City has hit a grim milestone, 10,000 official deaths from COVID-19. Overnight, nearly 3,800 names were added to New York City's death toll. Many died at home, in nursing homes or assisted living facilities where the virus was suspected but not confirmed, a problem not just limited to New York. An NBC News investigation finds that of 27 states reporting, nearly 4,300 people have died in long-term care facilities. But even as the pandemic rages, leaders must consider when or how to reopen the economy. Governor Newsom announcing 6 key benchmarks California hopes to meet, including community testing and isolating those who are positive or exposed, preventing infection in those who are at high risk, preparing hospitals to handle a surge of patients, therapeutic drugs to meet demands, and social distancing at schools and businesses.
You may be having dinner with a waiter wearing gloves, maybe a face mask, dinner where the menu is disposable, where your temperature is checked before you walk in.
A new normal that will hopefully allow America to reopen.
Because the virus is still spreading here like it is in so many other states, there is no firm date on when California will reopen. The governor here has said in the past we could have stay-at-home orders into June. Hoda?
All right, Miguel, with that part of the story. Miguel, thank you.
Well, for that primetime special last night, we spoke with Dr. Anthony Fauci about what needs to be in place before states can even think about reopening. And we started by asking what he thinks about the president saying that there are some states that could lift stay-at-home orders even before May 1st.
I'm certain, though, even though I haven't specifically discussed this with him, that he's talking about some of the states that have a very low level right now, particularly those states with a low density of population and a lot of geographic lands.
Yes, but in any event, can you think of any state that would be ready to do that, lift those guidelines before May 1st?
You know, I haven't gone state by state through them, except to say, Savannah, that I do believe he was referring to those. And there is going to be a great deal of variability. It probably would be a rolling entry into it, with some states actually doing nothing different because they're still in a really difficult situation and you would not want to relax any of the physical separation guidelines, and others that would be doing really much better. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all.
And with understanding that every state, every country, every region, every community is different, what in your mind are the absolute musts, the absolute prerequisites that any community, state, or region must have in place in order to lift these mitigation guidelines?
Well, that's a great question, and we have discussed that many, many times. And the minimum thing is that you've got to be able to identify, isolate, get out of circulation, and do adequate and appropriate contact tracing as new cases arise. If you start pulling back on mitigation, physical separations, there will be infections. The real proof of the pudding of the success of this reentry is how quickly and effectively you identify them, you get them out of circulation, you give them care where needed, and you do contact tracing so that you don't have a beginning of a peak. If you don't have that, then you may have some difficulty, and that's what we're concerned about when we tell people what they really need to have in place.
You told the Associated Press earlier today we're not there yet in terms of the testing and tracing necessary to contain new outbreaks, which of course raises the question, how far away are we from getting there?
You know, we're rapidly approaching, if you look several weeks to a month ago, the number of tests were out there. Right now, there are, I believe the last number that we spoke about the day before yesterday or today was close to or even at or beyond 3 million tests. That's really far, far greater than what we were a couple of weeks ago. Right now, they're developing the capability of even escalating and accelerating that even more so that we would be able to have a significant number in the measured in the millions of tests each week.
I mean, what do we know about whether you do develop immunity to coronavirus? I'm sure you saw this report that came out of Korea from their CDC saying that they had found the virus had been reactivated in a number of patients they thought had been cured. What do you think about that?
We don't know how common that is. It's likely an uncommon event and won't have a public health impact. We have to be humble and modest and appreciate that we don't have all the answers with the antibody, because the things that we don't know is that in general, with viruses that we deal with all the time, when you develop an antibody after infection, it almost invariably means you're protected. We don't absolutely know that for sure yet. I think it is going to be the case. I can say I think it will be. The other thing that we don't know is the durability of protection. So are you protected for a month or 2 or 3, a half a year or a year? We need to get experience to know that.
Finally, as you know, New York has been hard hit. The governor has said recently that he believes, looking at the numbers, that there's been a plateau, that perhaps it's on the decline, and that the worst may be over. Broadening that out to the country as a whole, do you feel, as we sit here now, that the worst is behind us? Right now, given what we are doing, the worst looks like, for the most part, with a couple of exceptions, there's still a couple of cities right now, Savannah, that we're worried about that haven't yet peaked and turned around. But if you look at the New York metropolitan area as kind of the prototype that's been driving this through the country, and then look at the country as a whole, there's no doubt what we've seen over the last several days is a flattening out, and even when you get to New York, it's actually starting to come down regarding admissions, hospitalizations, needs for intensive care and intubation. Hopefully that trend will continue. So, as I say, I'm a very cautious person, but we are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. I think I almost heard you say, perhaps the worst is over, with many, many caveats.
Sorry, Savannah.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Always good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
You can't blame me for trying. I think we all are just waiting for Dr. Fauci to say, yes, okay, the worst is past, but he will always tell the truth, he
and
says.
By the way, that's the first time I think I've seen him laugh, and I like his laugh. All right, let's turn now to the presidential race and former President Barack Obama's long-awaited endorsement of his former Vice President Joe Biden. NBC's Peter Alexander's at the White House with the message just delivered to voters. Hey, Peter, good morning.
Hey, Hoda, good morning to you. President Obama, after sitting on the sidelines throughout the Democratic primary, injecting himself into the middle of the 2020 campaign, endorsing his former Vice President Joe Biden, the apparent Democratic nominee. That online video racking up more than 1 million views in just the first 40 minutes, adding fuel to the fierce battle for the White House.
Former President Barack Obama passing the torch to his longtime political partner.
I'm so proud to endorse Joe Biden for President of the United States. Choosing Joe to be my vice president was one of the best decisions I ever made.
The 12-minute video, part endorsement, part call to action, drawing a sharp contrast to President Trump without ever naming him.
We need Americans of goodwill to unite in a great awakening against a politics that too often has been characterized by corruption, carelessness, self-dealing, disinformation, ignorance, and just plain meanness.
Obama casting Biden is the right person to lead the country through the coronavirus crisis.
Joe helped me manage H1N1 and prevent the Ebola epidemic from becoming the type of pandemic we're seeing now.
Following Bernie Sanders' endorsement of Biden a day earlier.
And we need you in the White House.
The former president praising the Vermont senator.
Bernie's an American original, a man who has devoted his life to giving voice to working people's hopes, dreams, and frustrations.
And urging Sanders' progressive supporters to unite behind the more moderate Biden.
We have to look to the future. Bernie understands that, and Joe understands that.
Sanders echoing that message, telling the Associated Press it would be irresponsible for his loyalists to oppose Biden, warning those who sit on their hands will only help President Trump win. President Trump's re-election campaign dismissing the Obama endorsement, saying Obama has no other choice but to support Biden, adding President Trump will destroy him. Biden's repeatedly played up his partnership with Obama.
I stand with Barack Obama all 8 years, good, bad, and indifferent. That's where I stand.
His former boss now returning the favor.
Joe has all the qualities we need in a president right now.
President Obama in that video saying he will be on the campaign trail as soon as he can. The former president always fared better when his name was on the ballot than when he was campaigning for others. Consider Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016. But Biden is betting that Obama's popularity and Americans' memories of their administration will benefit him this fall. Hoda and Savannah.
All right. Peter Alexander at the White House. Peter, thank you.
And much more to get to this morning, including the newest tribute to the men and women on the front lines of this fight against the virus. That is the Washington National Cathedral, all lit up in blue. They're going to do it every night this week, starting at 8 o'clock. The National Harbor, the Capitol Wheel, and Fleet Street also taking part. It's such a beautiful tribute, and we've seen it around the country.
Yes.
Major landmarks lighting up in blue for our first responders.
And that big thank you right in the center. All right. Why don't we switch gears and get a check of the weather from Al. Hey, Al, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. We've got a lot of sunshine in the Northeast. However, down in the Sunshine State, not so much. As we look on the radar, you'll see those showers and thunderstorms firing up. Part of a stationary front that's just going to continue to dump a lot of rain over the next 24 hours. Some folks may see upwards of 1 to 2 inches of rain per hour, especially in north central Florida. We're also watching a fast-moving spring storm Thursday, heavy snow and wind in the Rockies. Mixed rain and snow as this moves to the east on Friday, and by Saturday we're looking at rain and storms in the south, wet snow in interior New England. Look at this swath of snow, upwards of 8 inches through the Rockies, but look how far east this comes as we go from Omaha, Peoria, Chicago, and even upstate New York with some lighter snow.